Hey there, School of Tomorrowland. Greetings from Portland, Oregon. Shout out to the crew at El Mercado. This was the shirt I got from Chris, actually, I think through Rosalie, who just had a birthday and was wearing her shirt just like that one, as we met at El Barrio, owned by Chris. So I'm back in Quora here. I'm helping somebody. It's a very simple question. How do I use Python to add numbers between 1 and 20? In a way, they're just sort of testing the waters. Somebody very young, perhaps, who's maybe new to the concept of prime numbers. So, what's fun in any computer language, and you'll see this implemented in almost any language you study, most likely, is how to generate the prime numbers. So, I've got a link there to my GitHub, and they can look at my source code for doing the same kind of stuff. And I document over the years. It looks like I started this back in 2000, right? So over 20 years ago. It's not like I play with this every day. It's just there in my stash. And there's things like this all over the internet, right? It's like as we grow in our abilities, learning our various skills, we document those in a public way so that other people get a sense of what we can do if they're interested in using our services or whatever. You know what I mean? A profile, we call it. So we try to encourage that with students and faculty to always be working on your profile. Could be on Facebook. I mean, your profile is a concept, it's not any specific software. So when I say it could be on Facebook, it's like that is part of a person's profile sometimes. How do you use Twitter? How do you use LinkedIn or all these services? It's different for me. I'm in my time and space. I got my services. You'll have your services. There'll be some overlap perhaps. I think in terms of USAOS, like instead of a nation with boundaries, it's an operating system with limitations, things it can and cannot do. And privacy is a big part of what the design's all about, right? We're looking at operating systems that do exist and seeing, how so much of what they do is allocate resources in a way that preserves privacy and what constitutes, a violation of that. What's secure, what's insecure. All this is overlapping in terms of government and cyberspace. So what I'm scrolling through is what we do in School of Tomorrow. We integrate today's technologies. That would be SQL, a programming language or two, I would say two or more. And it doesn't have to be any that I know. Like, I'm just one more teacher here. But I do support some kind of notebook, interactive notebook, right? And coming with the Python ecosystem, you have things like SymPy, where I can actually, this is a graphic I did using a toy that never made it to market. Long reason. So at least I have the graphics right. And here we're solving an equation to get phi. I say phi, some people say phi. I think of tau, excuse me, as 1 over phi. I kind of laugh because I know it's in a fight too to become 2 pi. And I kind of like that idea that tau would go off and mean what we mean by 2 pi. Anyway, these are loose conventions. They have a half-life, you could say. And I got this right from the documentation, how to create a continued fraction. So there's just a whole vista, a whole territory that, to me, if you're using a Texas Instruments calculator instead of something like this, then I would say that's not up to standard as far as USAOS, the operating system I'm talking about. Like, that's not up to snuff as far as being, um, I wouldn't wave my flag over it and say this is my public school. Right? I wouldn't count it as being American in any real sense if it doesn't share any of this technology, right? It's something alien. Doesn't mean bad, right? It's just outside, not part of our system yet. Maybe wants to become so. Anyway, the way of Spinoza. I only link to this because I'm reassuring teachers. What do I do in this channel a lot? I'm showing teachers, other teachers besides me, that there's plenty of material here, plenty of stuff to munch on as you integrate the Bucky Fuller content. You've got lots of secondary literature. I've just been scanning through a new stash, academia.edu. If you dig around in there, you can come across some very interesting papers, such as this one by Jonathan Massey. And there's more. There's a lot more. I'm just going to show you two of them as representative. Antoine Picon has also come up with pretty interesting text and graphics collection here. There's a lot to say about Fuller the technocrat in these papers. Looking back, a lot of people don't realize, though, that a technocrat, capital T, they actually had like a way to dress up, symbols, icons, peculiar jargon. The technocrat party, basically. They used the yin yang, and they had long caravans of gray cars and stuff like that. So when you say technocrat, a reader may or may not have such detailed associations. If you're talking lowercase technocrat or uppercase or capitalized technocrat. Was Fuller a technocrat? When you define it very generally, that he believed in harnessing humans' industrial capabilities to solve housing problems, shelter problems, yeah, he's like, look at the plane industry, look at the car industry, look at the boat industry. Why are houses not built more like that? Assembly line. And the architects were kind of horrified because their whole business model is catering to individuals and building monuments to individuality of the architect, of the client, right? It may be a memorial to the architect more than to the client. It depends, right? But in any case, this idea of churning out housing solutions, we consider that like of marginal architectural interest and leave it to the mobile home industry. It is more of an adjunct to the vehicle industry, in other words, Airstream and so forth. So we're in the same space, you could say, as Airstream, but we're thinking more of um, a yurt-looking objects, and the Fuller Dymaxion line, which never did get fully implemented, and that's always a story. And again, here I am just saying, hey, here's a big story. The industry missed. We can talk about it without it existing, right? Science fiction, Martian math. So what does exist, though, are Jupyter notebooks, SymPy, all this graphing software. Like, I just write this stuff, but the idea is students come along and learn these skills too. This could be a student notebook. It's not about me, it's about us and these skills that we're sharing. And I'll close by saying I think these days, if you're looking back on Bucky and talking about design science and socialism versus capitalism, I mean, he's always making the point that the military is very socialist, right? It's where he didn't have to make money with his boats, as he says. And then he gets shoved into capitalism a la organized crime world, a la Chicago, right? It was funny, one of the authors said he got a job with an armor company. It was armor, the meat packing company, really. But the whole point is, at the core of the military is what you could say is socialism. And in these articles, it's a lot about the Cold War. It says USSR here, and there's the Bucky Pavilion. This is in Montreal. And the sort of competition between the two. Now, did Bucky stand for capitalism? There is that often cited link to the Transcendentalists and to Emersonian individualism. And Fuller he really strutted around, you could say. It's easy to mock him, kind of like, because he's kind of short, but he was like a captain of industry, right? He acted like a CEO of something big, and he had a suit and all this stuff. So that was kind of the paradox of Bucky. He appears to be highly critical of capitalism, and on the other hand, he comes off as a capitalist. And there's a lot we could say about that, but the point I'm trying to make is once you throw around words like technocrat and socialist and try to make sense of the future, it doesn't necessarily hold up. It can turn to soup rather quickly, which just shows you these concepts are not so robust. The ones like capitalism versus socialism, because they don't go back far enough either. Like, take ancient Rome. Do we just say out of the box that was fascist? But there was a lot of entrepreneurialness to Rome, a lot of merchant class and stuff. And international trade was going on, and the emperor didn't necessarily control everything. So our words, I think, are somewhat artificially a product of, say, the 1800s, a lot of it. And when it comes to social engineering going forward, I don't think we should lock ourselves into that vocabulary. Also, the open source, that leads me to my final point. The open source revolution, Linux and all that stuff, GNU, the GPL, all these new licenses. This is what? Socialism? What? Communism? It's owning things in common, right? Like, I only have these free tools and I'm sharing them in a school because they're all free to all of us, right? We're not paying big bucks for these tools. And why is that? Wasn't there a design science revolution the way Bucky predicted? In other words, isn't he right in Grunch of Giants that a design science revolution was coming? It came, and now you're looking at, the results. This isn't bad for 20 years of evolution or so, 40 since he died in 83. It's like we've moved along, and so has the psychology. Like, the zeitgeist hasn't stayed still either. And I think we're kind of on track, right? We're doing okay over here. Let's put it that way. Good luck, though, in catching up, right? If your school is way behind, here's what it looks like. High school in 2021, okay? This is just average now. So I'm not in teachers union, so I'm allowed to break that kind of news. All right, so that's it. You've got plenty to work with. Please keep integrating and letting me know your results. And talk soon.